that travel is the only thing you buy that makes you richer. And I don't care what you call it, but you have to have a plan for what you want when you're dying.
And I'm reminded of what C.S. Lewis said, which is, you are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream. Welcome to Elder Wisdom, Stories from the Green Bench. We are again so pleased to have you here with us today. And as usual, we're going to have an informative and fun chat, full of wisdom, of course. But first, I'm Kathy Buckworth, and as always, I have the pleasure of sharing this green bench with my co-host, Evelyn Brindle, who lives at the village of Erin Meadows in Mississauga. Hello, Evelyn.
Hello, Kathy. I hope everything is good with you today.
It's great. I'm very excited about talking with Sharon Hunwicks today.
I am too. It's quite an interesting background that she has. And talking to us this morning, we're going to learn a lot about how she has mentored many teenagers and how they've been doing, as well as she's a very, very strong advocate for Parkinson's disease. It's one that we don't know too much about, us in the public, I would say, and that there are over 100,000 Canadians who face this every year, and 30 more are added to that group every day. So it's a growing concern.
It is. And this podcast, as you know, we like to reinforce all the time, is all about sharing wisdom, sharing elder wisdom. So Sharon is the perfect person to talk to that today. As you've mentioned, she has led group sessions with teenagers where she focuses on mentorship and development. As you've said, a strong advocate for Parkinson's awareness and public education. And guess what? She also held a position of deputy director at the Office of the Attorney General. This is a very established person we're talking with here today, Evelyn.
You're right. She is something else, really. We'll get a very interesting conversation going here.
And she's with us right now. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning.
We're so excited to have you on the episode with us today and to share some of your knowledge. So I'm going to start sort of right from the beginning here and talk about your own life experience with Parkinson's. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I got it quite early at the age of 43. I was diagnosed. I had suffered a stroke at work, and we didn't know the cause or anything like that. So when we did all the testing and they confirmed I had Parkinson's, I basically didn't believe them. And I denied it for quite some time. I hid it from my family and everything else until it got to the point where it was kind of obvious there was something wrong. But I kept on working and just refused to deal with it. But that's because I didn't do enough research. So I started doing daily research and trying to get into the means and why me and all that kind of stuff. But it's not known very well to a lot of people until you have it yourself or someone you know close to you. And it was just devastating for me. And it was also a busy time in my life because I was raising 3 boys and I had the Parkinson's and I had work, and building my career up to work was in the midst of all this. So it was a busy time.
Can you share with us what some of the symptoms were, how you sort of knew something was going on?
Yeah, I was exhausted all the time. I could be sitting in my office and literally fall asleep. I would nod off, and that's not very good when you're doing any kind of speeches to your staff and they're looking at you like, what's going on here? But I had the twitching in my hands, the numbness, and then my feet were starting to cramp, like lock up on me. And it just started going from there. So I ended up having a lot of muscle spasms that I wasn't prepared to take on. And it was just difficult.
Are there ways to alleviate the symptoms at all, Sharon?
Well, there is. I mean, when I first found out that I had it, I had to go for they wanted to do some sort of training to see how my muscles would respond. But basically, because there's no cure for Parkinson's and it hits people so many different ways, Like some people will get the tremors, some people will get inside tremors, some people will just get the twitching and tiredness. So it hits people different ways. I think that's why nobody's really dug into knowing the means or why, but we just try to make it easier on people.
Did you run into the problem of getting a diagnosis? I
Yes,
understand that for some people, or quite a lot of people, it takes 1 to 2 or 3 years before they
yes.
even know that they
Well,
really have Parkinson's.
you're right. That was a lot of the, like I had to make a list for when I was getting any testing done because they almost do it like process of elimination. Parkinson's is very close to MS. And
Yes.
so I was tested for MS. I was tested for the Parkinson's, and then they sort of weed out the symptoms and what I'm left with. And that's how they come up with the diagnosis because they're not sure and they don't know enough about the symptoms and if they all qualify or if it's just hitting somebody differently. So it's almost like having a group. I used to have group sessions with some of my friends who also have Parkinson's. And we used to just list everything or talk about the things that happened to me, what happened to them, and then how they're similar, but they sometimes hit us in different ways and how we deal with it as well.
Absolutely. Part
Mhm.
of what you do as well, though, is acting as a mentor with teenagers, as well as your advocacy for Parkinson's. And I wanted to touch on that a bit, and then we'll get back into some of the more advocacy work that you do. But I did want to, for sure, touch on what you're doing with teenagers. How did you get involved with that, Sharon?
I was a single mom at the time. I was raising 3 boys, and our rec center on our street, I lived on the same street, had all kinds of programs, and I started working there part time with my full time job.
Wow.
And yeah, well, at least I gave a destination for my kids to be too. So I got them involved in everything, and I was working there, and I just got into it there. And I would talk. I had some sessions where a lot of my kids, I call them that. The baseball team that I was coach of had a lot of kids who had problems communicating with their parents and stuff because they were from another country. They didn't speak English. So they used to come and hang out in the rec center. So we started up a youth group, and kids just started piling in to talk about different issues, whether it's amongst themselves or they would come to me and just say, "What do I do about this?" Or, anything to do with learning, or how do I tell my mom and dad other things? And it was just guiding them to be, figure out what they want to do and how they go about doing it.
Do you stay in touch with any of the ones that
I
you've
do,
mentioned?
I do. Because my kids were there and involved, it was a lot of their school friends and a lot of I got to know their parents. So the communication thing was a bit easier. But yeah, I do keep in touch with a few of them, and they're doing quite well, actually. So it's almost like a pat on my back to say, I've, I've led them in a way that at least they're comfortable and they can deal with it.
You're right. That's very reassuring, not only for them but also for you and the
Yeah,
contact, yeah, the information that you've passed on to them and help them to succeed, which
right.
is the best part of mentoring, trying to get the others to be successful.
Yeah, well, a
Yeah.
lot of them,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
A lot of them were guided by their parents on, you have to go into this business, you have to do this. And they
Right.
needed to understand there were other opportunities out there. But a lot of them didn't ever want to speak about what they were because they didn't want to upset their families or that kind of thing. So I would just send them to do some research and see what they want to do. And then from there, they can make some decisions. And they've made good ones from the ones I still keep in touch with. So,
Oh,
Can you,
that's always great, isn't it, to
yeah, it
see
is.
that?
It's a good feeling anyway.
can you share one of those stories with us, Sharon, where you saw a positive impact as a result of the mentorship you provided?
Yeah, well, there was one where I was their baseball coach and they couldn't get to the games because their parents didn't drive. They didn't understand English. And so I made appointments to have the parents come to one of the games. I rented a truck, a minivan, and we all went to the game. And they were
Nice.
just amazed, but they didn't want to get that involved because they were working. They were, trying to
Mhm.
survive. ESL wasn't their, the language. And so they tried to fit in, but I would write things down for them. I should do like a ledger for them. I said, take this home to your parents. They can understand where you're going to be, how to get in touch with me. And it was all just these connection phone numbers. And they would use that, and they do that now with their children. So it's kind of nice to see that sort of little things like that follow through,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to do all that.
You must have had the flip side of that coin, maybe, though, where you had some big challenges. Were there any challenges that stood out for you? And
Yeah,
how did
there
you
were
deal with
some.
that?
There were some where, unfortunately, I lived in downtown Toronto. I loved it there, but there were some gang members and stuff like that that would always try to influence the kids from the rec center for whatever reason. I'm sure it was not exactly any good for them, but they were influenced. And these were a lot of their older siblings, and then sometimes just people in the neighborhood. And they would come to me and say, "What do I do?" I said, "You got to know what's right in your heart and what you have to do, and you have to make some decisions. That's what part of life is." But
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Don't ever feel you're alone. There's always someone out there that you can reach out to. If it's not me, it's someone else in the rec center." Like, there were great regional managers and people who would do outkeep and update the kids on what's going on, take them under their wings. So it was comforting because I knew I had somewhere, if any of my children had gone astray, that I knew that I could go there too. And I think my kids just sat back and watched it all happen and learned that way. So there's different angles that you could come out with.
What advice would you give some of our listeners who are interested in mentoring young people and youth? Are there any pieces of advice you could share with them as they get started on that journey?
Well, yeah, I guess it's just being there and listening open, because kids today will hold back and they won't tell you what's really on their mind. Usually you have to do a bit of digging to see what they're really concerned about. But there's always somewhere out there that you can ask for help. And it's not necessarily help, even just to learn things about my Parkinson's or whatever else is ailing somebody else, and just have the understanding that everybody has their issues. How do we get them past that, and how do we make it better to live through it all?
Great advice. This is what this podcast is all about, right,
Yeah.
Evelyn? All this
Oh,
elder wisdom
yes,
that we're getting from Sharon.
that's very true. You mentioned that your boys were with you sometimes, and what influence did that have on them or on the way you raised them?
Well, I mean, I just basically became my mother. And I saw so many things that I'd said when I was younger. I'm never going to be like my mom. I'm going to do things my way. And it
Of
ends up being
course.
the same way, of course. And you see that as you grow older. But they've taken a lot of this back with them, and they've just heard it from me, and they've heard it from their family. And they had a great influence too. I mean, their father was in their life all the time and still is. So that's always good. They didn't have to seem like they were abandoned one way and didn't have anywhere to go. They always had the option of choosing what they wanted. And then him and I would both see them through that. So it was okay. And I think they're great guys. So they turned out well for me.
Good.
You have such a diverse background, Sharon. How did you end up in the Attorney General's office?
That was funny because I was a teacher's aide at my children's school. And when the NDP came in to be the political party, a lot of the teachers, school principals were all elected to become cabinet ministers. And I was working in a couple of the schools where the principals came to me and said, "I'd like you to come work in my MPP offices."
Hmm.
So I said, "That's fine." So I went there and worked for them. But really, what they wanted me to do was to be a runner for downtown Queen's Park, because they haven't
Ah,
really had someone that could communicate with the community itself and still carry the issues down to Queen's Park. So I became one of those jobs, and I was scheduler to one of the ministers. And that's what got me involved in Queen's Park downtown. Then, as the government changes, of course, then you have to relook for your jobs because they're all contract jobs. And I had
right.
only planned to go back to work part time. But I'll tell you, once you get into that environment, you get sucked in pretty quickly, and you have a lot of work to do. So the time just flew by. And that's how I became involved in politics and Queen's Park and all that stuff that's going on.
Are
And
you are you still very interested in politics, Sharon?
you know what? I was when I first left work. because I was thinking, I'm in my mindset, I was going back to work. So I had to keep up on all the issues. Today, I listen to the politics and I actually chuckle because it's the same old issues, same day, same, only different people. And
Right,
it's,
right.
it's
Yeah.
funny, right? So that's a lot of repeats. So as you get older, you just know, oh, here we go again. Here's another one going. And that's how I look at it. So it's actually, I'm not involved the same way I was involved before, but I listen to the news because you got to keep up on what's going on around you. So,
Do you use any of your experiences from that in your advocacy for Parkinson's?
well, I'm just trying to find out what people know about the Parkinson's. And we have quite a number of people here now who are developing or who have been diagnosed. And it's funny, I can walk down the street or be in a crowd and I can pick out pretty much every person that's suffering from it,
Mm,
and which I never noticed before. It's now,
mm.
it seems to be just there in front of me. And I think I got to do something about this because they all had the same questions I had, like why me? What happens? Is it hereditary? What do I do? What medicines? All the treatments you can go for. And there's no real set list anywhere. So that's just something I'd like to get involved in, organizing and just letting people know more about what they should know if they've got the illness or if they know of someone who has it.
It is quite a complex disease.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
And it affects so many parts of your body. Like if it was just one thing or another, you could fight a bit harder or just find means to do better. But I hope that somehow we can make it open for everybody to realize that this is not a doom and gloom as we hope as it is, that we can build up some positive thinking to get more people aware of what's going on.
And you're a resident of the village of Erin Mills Lodge. And
Yes, I am.
how has been how has living there helped you raise awareness and share some of your journey? What's your experience there been like?
Well, I haven't been here that long, but
Okay.
it's still good for me because it helps me focus on the things that I want to get focused on, like reading more and seeing what can be done or research or but basically it's one on one or when we're in a group setting in art class or if we're in something here that's part of the programming, I sit and talk with other people and it's funny how many times people will say that happens to me too. Did you know that we can do this? And it was
Mm,
just making them aware of things that I've learned over the years because I've had it for quite some time and others who have just getting pretty much the first couple years and they don't know enough about it themselves. So they'll come and ask me, do you get this every morning or how do you get up in the morning if it's hurting or the muscles are cramping or it's just not working for you. And there's everything works differently for different people, but it's a starting point. And if they can get into a routine, that's the most I've found is to have everything on a schedule. Once I go off my schedule, it sets my whole system off. So people
right.
need to understand that because I think they try to do differently, saying that's not going to happen to me, so I'm going to do this or this. And it doesn't work. You have to stay on a tight schedule with your meds, with your physio, with all that. It's very important to keep a tight schedule.
Yeah, and the challenges are quite something, especially you've talked about the pain and the lack of support.
Mhm.
So how you sound like a very positive person, Sharon. How do you stay positive and keep advocating for the change?
Well, I just keep telling myself if I can sit up in the morning and my feet touch the ground, I'm off to a good start. Because first thing in the morning is probably your worst time because your muscles have been relaxing all night. And then you're all of a sudden sitting up,
Mm,
forcing them to work. And sometimes they work fine. And I'm up and about and I'm in my wheelchair. Other days I can't even stand. So it's just a day by day thing. But it's just saying, I always just tell myself if I can stand up and my legs work, that's fine. But there must be someone else here who's hurting more than me. So then I try to focus to say, it could be worse. So let's just get day by day.
that's a great attitude. And for those listening to this and they're thinking, maybe I have this, or I'm supporting a loved one, I'm starting to see some
Yeah,
of the symptoms. What advice do you have for them who are just starting to navigate life with Parkinson's, or in fact, supporting someone who has it?
right. It's a hard thing to do because a lot of people won't notice. It's not that visible until it gets into further stages. And that makes it difficult because a lot of times, by the time you get to different stages of Parkinson's, you don't want to accept it any longer, or you can accept it. So it's a choice you have to make. And it's just trying to keep positive for all of that, because there are bad days and there are good days, but that's with anything. So I think you just have to persevere and try to just push on every day.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have Parkinson's when you were about 40, and yet
43,
mo-
yes.
most most people it affects are the elderly or those 60 years old or
That's right.
over.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Um, but one of the things that I was reading about Parkinson's is just one of the problems is the stigma that you face, or the inner stigma that people with Parkinson's have about themselves. And that was something that I would like you to talk about, because we need to understand how other people are facing these problems with when
Right.
they have it. It shouldn't be that way, and yet people do have those kind of prejudices or make assumptions that really aren't true.
Right.
Have you faced the stigmas as well?
I have. I've come across people who will say to me, um, you look like you're not feeling well today, or my face demeanor is different. And I say, no, I'm having a bad day. Well, what's wrong with you? You're up, you're walking. What could be wrong with you? And I said, well, I have some muscle pain, but I'm getting through it because I'm taking my meds. Well, how often do you take your meds? And they're amazed at how much I take. But that's my fix in the morning. As I get up at 7 a.m. and I take about 10 pills. That's just to get the muscles working, take away some of the pain, take away some of the swelling, and then focuses me on what I have to do for the day. So that's one of the things that really bothers me, is people don't understand what the day in life of a person with Parkinson's can go through. And every day it's different. So if it was a repetitive day, to me, that's a lot easier to handle because it's the same old every day. But every day here, and I'm glad I have this place here because it's provided me with the care when I need it. And it's there as a backup when it's going to come. And I don't always know when that's going to be. So it's nice to have that in place. And that starts my time off. And for others, it might be something different, but you have to find a focus to keep you going.
Yeah. How, what would you advise or suggest that our listeners do, or what can they learn, or how should they respond to someone with Parkinson's disease?
Well, I mean, it's hard to admit that someone you want to have, that you love, or yourself, have it. Once you get diagnosed, you have to do a lot of reading. I go on the different research areas and I just read and read and read. There's symptoms of Parkinson's. There's how you deal with those symptoms, what medicines you can take, what physio, all it just lists everything that you can get into. Just I read a lot. I keep
Mhm.
going to different sites and just trying to always educate myself in case there's going to be, and I hope there will be soon, some sort of remedy to fix all this, because a lot of things are internal feelings, and then all of a sudden you're falling apart one day because you're having a bad day and you don't know how to deal with it. Just ask your doctor, ask your hospital. Community places are really good to look through, and just see what you can get peace of mind for yourself. And then that will reflect on other people that you're involved with.
Sharon, is there a place where you would suggest our listeners go, a website or association where they can get all of this information?
I go into the Parkinson's, just general Parkinson's Canada.
Okay.
I also use the Michael J. Fox Research Foundation, and he puts on also seminars. He goes around the country putting on seminars. I've not been to one. I had booked one, but then I had a stroke following that, so it didn't work out for me in timing. But I just look for things that you can get involved in and keep yourself focused. And that
Yeah.
doesn't always work every day, but it's there.
Yeah, he's been a great spokesperson. I saw him speak
Yes.
actually, and
Did you?
I've read his book, and there's a documentary out too called Still. I don't know if you've seen that he's in. So
Yeah,
he's
I
an
know
inspiration. Yeah.
he is. Because he got it very young. I believe the same age as I did. He
Hmm.
was in his 40s.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and he's still doing the kicking. And, as he said in an interview one day, as long as my legs are moving me around, I'll continue to do it. So, everybody has their own way of looking at it. And because there is no cure for Parkinson's, it just gives question to why haven't we gone anywhere than we have further than all the other illnesses that people come. So
Well, you're an inspiration yourself, Sharon. I can tell just in speaking with
thank you.
you. I would love to know what's if you could give a piece of advice to your own teenage self, if you were mentoring yourself, Sharon,
Oh boy.
what would you exactly right? What would you have told yourself as a teen?
To keep on fighting because you never know when something's going to be brought up to us or will better the issues and what we're dealing with, and never give up because like I said, if I can touch the floor in the morning, I'm going that day. So that's basically what I think about every day.
Is there any particular activity or hobby that you like doing or can are able to do?
I just like being in crowds. Most times you get me going and I'm just a chatter, but I like to hear about people's experiences and what they do to alleviate if it's a problem, and hopefully there's a lot of positive that we can look at. But I just like crowds. I like being in a group setting, and like here, Alana's given me time to be part of this kind of conversation, as
Right.
well as I volunteer or I go to a lot of the events we have here,
Hmm.
and then I just sit back and I watch people. It just tells me a lot about them when you go to those events and you see what they can or can't do. And then it just has conversations with people about how they're getting through life in general.
It's one of the best things about living in one of the Schlegel villages. There's always people around and many, many activities to join
Yes,
into.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Is
My
there a
la-
physical? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Sharon.
I'm just going to say my latest experience was taking part in the Olympics,
Oh yeah.
and I had never experienced anything like that before. But it's seeing so many of the Schlegel come together and be like a big family and have so much fun, and that's at the expense of your illness or your disability. It just gives people so much to look forward to
Can
because
you
I
tell
never
us?
knew anything like that
Yeah.
existed.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened at the Olympics? What was that about?
It was just Olympics for all the people that were here. There was a list of criteria and games and events that you had to do. I myself was part of the bicycle event and
Nice.
rode my legs off, but I ended up coming in fourth place. But it's then you get to meet other people. You get to see how much people are willing to push to get answers or to be part of an event like that. And that took a lot of work. It was just millions of people getting together. I was amazed at how that worked out.
Yeah, the Schlegel Olympics. I followed it on social media. It looked
Mhm.
pretty great. I have to
Yeah,
say.
and we had our golden star here, Melody, and she was doing the shooting game. The I don't know what we called it, arcade or something,
Hmm.
and she got a gold medal. So that was
Yay!
nice for us to bring home to here and put us on the map, I guess. So
Exactly.
yeah, so that was good. It was a lot of fun, and I appreciated that time.
Absolutely. So, for our listeners, and you've shared so much advice, obviously, on mentoring teenagers and giving advice to people just in your life, as well as
Mhm.
sharing information on Parkinson's. What do you hope others really take away from your story today?
Just the fact that nothing is written in stone. Everything's possible. So you just got to keep pushing and see how far you can get with it, and then be happy with what you settled for, if that's what you're going to do. But a lot of times with Parkinson's, we just push because
Hmm.
you have to have that in you to keep pushing until hopefully you're going to be that one at the end when they say things are changing.
Is there a physical green bench at your village?
Yes, there is.
And have you sat on it? And have you shared stories
Yes,
on it?
I have. Yes, I have.
Amazing. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. Alana took me to the Mississauga Library. I think it was it? Yes, and I did a session there, with a number of other people. And that was a nice experience too, but that was more one-on-one. So it's different than this.
Yeah,
But
it's different than this where everyone's listening. What
right.
kind of can you share with us a story that you might have?
Well, we had one young girl there. What was that, Elaine? We had one young girl that came in, and she was from another country. She had no family up here. She had no friends. She had just arrived, and she started school, and she went to one of the major universities, and she was just lost. She didn't know what community things she could get involved in, what she could do to not feel so lonely and away from her family, but she knew she wanted to be here for her education. So we gave her there at the library just a list of community places that she could drop in, and hopefully they can help her on her housing and her different things that she wanted to do and not to feel so lonely. So
That's amazing.
she was pretty much happy that we had done that because she didn't know where to start. I'm sure it's taken her off to other places by now, but it was nice to see that she was smiling when she left because she looked very depressed and upset because she's here in this country alone.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you can help somebody like that, it's always a good thing.
I have a kid who attends George Brown College in downtown Toronto and just came
Mhm.
across a green bench and sat on it. But
Yeah.
so they're out there and it's great. We're sharing all kinds of wisdom,
Yeah.
especially through this podcast.
Great. I thank you for having me here.
Well, I know it's been amazing having you sharing this story with us today. This is going to be a very popular episode. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're so insightful and very well spoken. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure
Thank you
Evelyn
very
feels
much.
the same way.
Oh, definitely. And I wish you many happy and healthy days ahead and keep up the brave effort to cope with this disease. And it's very difficult, I know, when talking and being with others and having their help as well is really makes our days sometimes. So keep well. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure talking with you today, Kathy. It's Sharon, and I hope you have many happy days ahead and healthy ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And always, Evelyn, a great pleasure to speak with you as well. We're at the end of another episode, so thank you for joining us today. Thanks for letting us bring these stories to you, these stories of elder wisdom. If you're just a new listener for us, we do have 73 other episodes you can go back and listen to, so please do that. Use the hashtag Elder Wisdom if you want to share on social media. And take a look at the Elder Wisdom Pledge Against Ageism if you go to elderwisdom.ca. Thanks so much, Evelyn, for being my co-host extraordinaire as usual. I'm Kathy Buckworth. Thanks for listening to us today. Please join us for the next episode of Stories from the Green Bench.
Elder Wisdom, Stories from the Green Bench, is brought to you by Schlegel Villages, a complete continuum of care, offering independent living to long-term care, celebrating and honoring the wisdom of the elder. To learn more about us, please go to our website, schlegelvillages.com.